When you think of the names Tom Brady or Serena Williams, it's hard to think of those athletes and not think of the word longevity because of how competitive they were all their careers, but especially later in life. Well, as an exercise physiologist and a proponent of longevity, it's hard when I think of those names not to think of George Blonda or Martina Navratilova, two other athletes that had very long, incredible careers later in life, except this was decades ago. And you start thinking, okay, what are the differences? It leads me to the question of, is this a factor of a great athlete and their age or a difference in research? Today on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personal Edge Fitness. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast, dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness, and tackling my favorite topic, and that is, of course, the lie of age. And we're going to jump into dealing with the comparison of age and actually research today. But before we get into it, I want to tell you how to get in touch with the show if you have any questions about this topic or any others, or any questions dealing with dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness. You can contact me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That is, of course, also our website, personaledgefitness.com, and also our Facebook page. Hit me up on Twitter at TeamPE, or give me a call at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. Love to hear from you. And actually, this podcast today came from a question actually in a presentation I gave, in one of my presentations on the lie of age. At the end of it, talking about the 4 components that actually dictate ability, the ones that are clinically proven to dictate ability, of which age is not one. The 4 components, as I've told you many times, are fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset, and they're all clinically proven. They're completely our responsibility, in our control. They're our fault. We actually control those things. That, like I say, is clinically proven, and age and deterioration associated with age is, of course, not. There's a lot of examples of this out there in athletics. Lately, even though he's retired now, there's still plenty of conversations going on about Tom Brady. There's conversations going on about Aaron Rodgers. There's conversations going on, like I mentioned, the tennis great Serena Williams, and the fact that she just retired in September 2022. But I don't think anybody should be surprised if she decided to make a comeback and did a great job of it. And when I think of these athletes, I've talked about this in other podcasts, and people just are amazed at the fact that Tom Brady played into his 40s, that he was not only playing in his 40s, he was great in his 40s. And the fact that Serena, when she did her last U.S. Open, even though I don't think she was, I'm not sure how far she was ranked at the time, nobody was counting her out. They knew for a fact that, hey, this lady can win it all, and everybody knows that, even though she was 41 years old at the time. Well, it's hard for me when I hear those stories not to think of George Blonda. George Blonda, who played for the Oakland Raiders. I'm not sure if he switched teams after that, but he played all the way up till he was 48 years old. 1976, and it was his last game. He was 48 years old and still playing. Now, he'd switched positions. He'd played several positions, most notably played quarterback, and a very good quarterback for that matter, and then he was a place kicker. And a very good place kicker also. But there's the big difference between those two, Tom Brady and George Blonda. Tom Brady stopped playing at 45 years old in 2022. George Blonda stopped playing at 48 years old in 1976. I was talking about tennis players earlier. Serena Williams. She's tremendous. I mean, I don't even follow tennis now, but I did follow her career. She's amazing athlete. But she's played her last, at least singles, I know, professional tennis match at 41 years old. Then you've got Martina Navratilova, who stopped playing singles at 38 and played in her last professional tennis match, in a doubles match, at 49 years old. The only thing is that was back in the 80s. So, 40 years prior. So the reason I bring this up is that this is coming, most people aren't looking at this, but this is becoming far more commonplace for athletes to have careers later in life. And it's not unless they're horrible at handling their finances. For most of these athletes, it's not for the money. They're some of the wealthiest people in the world. So it's not for the money. I don't think they're in a contractual obligation like Elvis Presley had, where you had to keep playing. They love the game. They're still fantastic at it. They're still close to prime, if not at prime in some cases, but they're continuing to play. That begs the question, why? Well, they love it, Garrett. That makes sense. But most people don't look at the fact this is happening all over. All these athletes are playing longer and longer. And I think it's amazing to me, as this question that was posed to me was Garrett, you say that the 4 concepts that control what we always attribute as the aging process, the deterioration that we associate with time. When you say those things, but what about people like Martina Navratilova? Here's a fantastic player, but she eventually had to stop. So there's got to be an end to it. Well, what we're not looking at is that if you look at history and you look 30 years prior to Martina, what was the oldest tennis player playing professionally? What was the amazing number? And I'm sorry I didn't do the research on that, but I seriously doubt it was in the 40s. I mean, you may have had the one-off individual that was ranked 1,000th in the world or something and was still showing up on the tennis court, but playing at that level, playing at the level of Tom Brady, playing at the level of George Blanda, playing at the level of Serena, of Martina, of some of these Olympians that I'm going to talk about, that you didn't see 60, 80 years ago. And then all of a sudden, 40 years ago, you were seeing it. And now you're seeing it even more. But the surprising thought to me, the surprising concept to me is that it blows people's minds when I say, do you realize we're going to start seeing a menagerie of 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds in the Olympics within 4 years, 8 years? What are we going to see 30 years from now? And why would we not look at history and think that, yeah, that's obviously going to happen? Not possible, not just probable, but obviously it's going to happen. Why are we seeing that? Well, it boils down to research. It boils down to the fact that medicine, health is a science. It's an evolving science. As I've said many times on this show, that we've been studying the human body since the early 1500s, and we still don't know everything about it. And the same thing's going on with training. I mean, countless schools are doing all kinds of research, if nothing else, just for their own team, on what are the better training methods and what have you. And if you take the training methods that we're going to have 30 years from now and gave them to Serena Williams 10 years ago, would she still be playing? Would she be even better than she is? I'll show you what I mean. Let's take Martina Navratilova. During her career, which would span the 70s and 80s, she started playing when she was 16 years old. Much of her training at the time was revolutionary. I mean, it was just blowing people's minds. First thing, it was unheard of for tennis players to do any kind of exercises outside of tennis. Maybe doing a little bit of running, but the practice was just, everything was all about play tennis, be on the court, hit balls. And instead, she was adding things like plyometrics. She was adding aerobics to her program. She was adding yoga. She did a lot of strength and conditioning, a lot of strength exercises. That was taboo for golf players within the last 20 years. The ridiculous idea of lifting weights. Oh my gosh, you'll get bulky and, you won't be able to hit the ball and it's horrible for golf. And until Tiger Woods hit the scene. And everybody found out that, he was lifting weights and doing a lot of stuff outside of the game. And all of a sudden, I mean, I saw it in my practice. I saw all kinds of golfers now showing up for strength training, because it was unheard of. Well, that was what Martina was doing, and people just thought, well, she was a freak for doing these weird exercises. Contrast that with Serena Williams. Okay, now we have the information that we found out from Martina Navratilova and other players like her, and so she stopped playing singles not too long after Serena was born. So in Serena's decades of playing tennis, she had all kinds of nutritional understandings that Martina didn't have available to her. She had understandings about not only in training, using different wearable technology that a lot of us have. I've got a Garmin on my wrist right now that's measuring all kinds of biometrics on me right now. She was using these techniques that were unheard of back when Martina Navratilova was playing. On top of that, it's amazing the amount, and I lean, this is my opinion, but I lean heavily on this, that we are looking hard into recovery, that we're probably going to have such advancements in recovery that are going to radically change the athletic landscape. But she had a lot of this. She spent a lot of time working on her recovery, which I'm not sure how much of that the Martina was doing, and certainly the research that was available to Serena wasn't there for Martina Navratilova. And she ended up playing just singles 2 years shy of where Serena ended up playing, and she played doubles all the way up till it was almost her 50th birthday in her last competition. The same thing for George Blanda and Tom Brady. All right, for those of you who remember George Blanda, I actually remember seeing him play. Gutsy performance. And I actually read some books on the Oakland Raiders at that time, as I was a big Kenny Stabler fan. And I read about some of the things they were doing to lose weight. And it's just, taking all kinds of amphetamines and what have you, stuff that we know that we don't do now. He was a gutsy guy. He was really tough, and he worked hard. He worked hard in practice. He didn't skip practices and whatever. He worked hard in practice. He worked hard on the field. But he was very gutsy. I mean, I'm sure that his recovery and dealing with injuries and what have you were basically just suck it up, buttercup, kind of the Lou Gehrig approach to it, and let's just push through. What if you took that gutsy athlete and you gave him the technology and the research that we know of that Tom Brady had access to? Tom Brady did the same things that Serena Williams did. He approached his training from a holistic approach, which would have been laughed at 30 or 40 years ago. He used a very famous strict diet. He did resistance band workouts. If you did any kind of workouts 30 years ago and you were in a weight room, you're slinging serious steel. How much can you lift? I mean, that was it. He's using a resistance band. He's using cognitive exercises, working on the mind. And then on top of that, not only was his recovery, he was very active about his approach to injury prevention. And not only did he have the wearables and what have you and different research available to him that Serena Williams had, but he used deep tissue massage, neuromuscular exercises, and basically doing things to help his body maintain this resilience. I'll switch gears from the professional world and go into Olympics. And pardon me for not knowing this. I didn't do the research on it, but I know that there are some people that compete in the Olympics, some athletes that compete in the Olympics. And I know in horseback, that's one of the areas. When I say horseback, that covers a lot. I'm well aware of that. But I believe it was a dressage competitor who competed in the last Olympics, and he was in his 60s. There was a Jamaican-born sprinter. His name is Merlene Ottey. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He competed in the Olympics from 1980 all the way to 2000. That's 20 years. So basically 5 different Olympics that he competed in. His methods were just basically track drills. If you're a runner, you're a sprinter, get out there and run a lot. He did some weight training and did very basic cardiovascular workouts. Well, compare that to, and I'm going to butcher this name, I apologize, but I remember seeing her compete and thought this was amazing. Oksana Chusovitina. I'm going to do my best on that. Oksana Chusovitina is a gymnast who competed in her 8th Olympics in 2021 at the age of 46. She was a gymnast, but she had cutting-edge research, techniques such as hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I'm reading this now. The targeted muscle synchronization workouts. That phrase didn't exist 30 years ago. And biomechanical analysis have basically all that revolutionized her training. Well, what's the next generation going to have? We know this is ever evolving, and the whole concept of ice therapy has been around for years. Get some swelling, ice it, get the swelling down. Hydration. In the late 60s, early 70s, there was a college football team that revolutionized hydration. That was where the Gatorade did their test on this one university, and their players played much better at halftime because they were actually hydrated. That was something you didn't do. I mean, it was a sign of weakness was to stay hydrated. And of course now, oh gosh, Garrett, we know that. You're always talking about drinking water. Everybody knows about hydration. Yeah, they knew about that, but 30, 40 years ago, we didn't. Well, look at ice therapy. We didn't know anything about doing ice baths. There's been a ton of research done on ice baths now. There's all kinds of cold plunge devices that are out there. So what are they going to come up with next? What's the limit? And I'm careful using that because rarely will you say, okay, you'll hear me say, what's the limit? Because I believe we have no clue what it is. And in fact, I'll take it a step further. Because of what we've seen in history, because of the advancements we've seen, the advancements that all of us are well aware that if you were to ask anybody that pays any attention to sports, if 15 years from now, the college football teams will be using recovery techniques or exercises or training techniques that are light years ahead of what we're doing now, everybody would say, oh yeah, of course we are. But we don't think there's an end to it when there's more proof that we have no idea how far it can go. In the Journal of Sports and Science Medicine, they've emphasized the benefits of modern training techniques. So, the authorities are looking at this. The authorities are on top of this. For instance, periodization training. That's something that we use now that we've used for years now, but wasn't used several years ago. Using structured training cycles, optimize performance at the right time. This has been shown to enhance muscular strength and peak performance. There's tons of research going on about sports nutrition. Now, I'm talking about athletes here, but It starts with the athletes. It's sort of like a lot of the technology that we have, the technology that we use on our boats for satellite, the Garmins that we use on our boats, mapping and what have you. All that started in the military. And then it ends up going to the general public. Well, when it comes to training techniques and developing strength and recovery and injury prevention, it starts with the athletes, and then it makes it into the general public. We're seeing that same thing in medicine. We're learning more and more every day that chip away at what I call the excuse of, well, it's just genetics. I call it an excuse because that's the be-all, end-all, cure-all. We don't have an actual gene tied to this failure, but since we have no other answer, we're going to say it's genetics. And every year, modern medicine chips away at genetics. I think you've got a superior athlete, obviously. I think that if you look at it, people are born with different hair color, eye color, height, weight, frame size, what have you. I always believe that you're born with some of those certain physical gifts. A lot of them can be developed, obviously. But after that, there's no limit. There's no limit to me, at least in the foreseeable future, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, of how long these athletes can keep going, therefore, how long we can keep going. I mean, the studies are there. I hope to see a team in the near future, some professional sports team, whether it's soccer or football, basketball, doesn't matter, that ends up winning it all. Their Super Bowl, their World Series, World Cup, whatever. Where their average age is the highest in the entire field. And the reason I say that is that think of anything else. Think of things where your body you're not so dependent on your physical capabilities, but where your experience, your success relies on your experience. A teacher, a physician, a auto mechanic, whatever. When you are dealing with these individuals, you typically want the person that has the most experience. Well, when it comes to an athlete, it comes to your physical stature. You've got a machine there that you're working with that we know for a fact can repair itself. This is not unheard of. This is what exercise is based on. And now you're working with a mind that has worked with that body, that has had the most experience with that body, has had the most experience with that machine, has practiced with it the most, done the most things with it, tested it the most. Well, if we've got strength training, conditioning, recovery, injury prevention taken care of, then it would be foolish. It would be foolish to think that quote-unquote older athlete wouldn't be far more successful than the young lady or young stud coming out of high school and or college. It's something to think about. And it should change our mindset, which is the most important thing. We've got to believe that these things can happen because they are. They've happened all our life. And by focusing on trusting medicine, trusting the research, knowing that we have the studies that prove that we can keep going, that we can be stronger, that we can recover, that we can be successful at any age, is what's going to keep you obviously living longer, and is also one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Thank you so much for listening to me today, so I hope you join me next time.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.